Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. On the podcast today, we have Vicky Poole. Vicky, welcome.
Hi, Thomas. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
Oh, yeah, of course. So my name's Vicky. I'm an ancestral healer and coach. So what does that mean? Well, I help people, mostly parents and business people, look back at traits and behaviors that are coming up in their past and see how that affects what it is that generating today in their life. Because if you're always doing the same things over and over again, you're never going to get the things that you really, really want, because you need to change your behavior, you need to change something. And those things that we want to change have been ingrained in us since we were children. So we take it all the way back through the ancestry, see where it actually came up, and then reframe it. And when we reframe it, it loses its power so that we're able and free to do what we want. It's very good, very, very good and very useful for people with anxiety, anger management, or people looking to develop new positive habits.
Well, thank you for that introduction. It leads on to a whole load of a new topic of conversation, but I wanted to bring something up which we talked about briefly before we were recording, and that is that you're doing a summit soon, or you said the next couple of weeks, and you mentioned
I'm speaking at one, yeah.
It was a Gandhi quote that you mentioned. Did you want to go into that?
Yeah, of course. So I'm speaking at a summit that is on the I'm still waiting to get my time through. I think I'm speaking on the 30th of July, and it's for female entrepreneurs and mompreneurs. And I'm speaking about how we speak to ourselves and how that impacts our intention. Because Gandhi very famously said, and I'm going to get this quote wrong, I always get it wrong, our thoughts become our dreams become our vision becomes our reality becomes our have, and our have becomes our world. So the words that we say to ourselves inside our head, they either spur us on or they hold us back. And if they spur us on, they'll actually give us the oomph that we need to persevere and get over all the obstacles to get the thing that we really want, which could be that contract or marriage and kids and reconciliation with the partner. It could be anything. But if that intention's not there and that language that you use in your head is negative, it pulls you back, it limits you, it actually is the start of a depression spiral.
Well,
and
I was going to say,
tell how people speak to themselves by the words that they use. They either make themselves sound like a hero or a victim, which is interesting.
It's very interesting. The cool thing about getting it wrong, like you said, getting the quote wrong, is that you can now attribute that quote to yourself, right? So Vicky Poole said that.
100%. A very brilliant guy who I follow. He's part of Shanda Sumter's team, which is hardcore business in the States. A guy called Jim. He said, what was it? Success only exists in the absence of failure. So failure only exists in the absence of success. So just because you try something and you don't succeed doesn't mean that you need to stop. You've just tried one thing. You need to try the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And when you've tried all of the different possible outcomes or possible actions, you'll then have an opportunity to be successful, which is actually one of the things that the British military talk about. I'm reading a lot of military memoirs at the moment, and they talk a lot about excellence. So you perform a mission, you perform a task, and then at the end, you have what they call a prayer meeting, which I think is brilliant, because these used to happen most recently used to happen, or the debriefs used to happen rather, when they were out in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it was prayer time. So they used to grab half an hour to do their debriefs. And they would look at what went well, what didn't go to plan, and what weren't they expecting. So if they were to incorporate all that learning into the next mission, how would it be different? Would they send in pods of 3 instead of pods of 2? Would they have someone sweep for IEDs during the day so that they could just rock up and know exactly that the roads were clear? And it's that sort of constant sort of, I do this thing, I feed back on it, I then improve. And it's one of the things that we in corporate don't do. And as someone who's, been a real advocate for personal development and personal growth, both at work and at home for, I would say how many years, but I tell everyone I'm 21, so that'd give it away. It's so vitally important, because if you don't act with awareness and try to get better, you just do the same crap every day and you never actually improve.
Have you taken, what's an example of how you've taken a military principle and applied it to your life?
Oh, wow. Okay. So this is actually a really sensitive one. I grew up in a really abusive household.
Sorry to hear that.
It was the 80s, sweetie. No, it wasn't. It was the noughties. I'm still 21. Yeah, I grew up in the 80s, and it was very common for a man to hit a woman. Very. It was very common to have a woman being verbally beaten into her place, emotionally beaten into her place. It was the norm. So this is what I got. So this is how I expected to be treated by men and by other people. Now, as I kind of grew up and I went to university, I was like, oh my God, I'm living with people that are actually nice to each other. This is like odd for me. And then I kind of started to experiment with what kind of people am I attracting as partners? And when it ends in disaster, which inevitably it did, what was it that was coming up? What were the trends? What was actually going on? So then I started to go, okay, so I don't want people who play a lot of computer games don't resonate with me because I need to be outdoors a lot. I like walking and hiking. Great. So then I'd find someone, or the universe would send me somebody who didn't play computer games, but they'd spend a lot of time in the gym. I said, yeah, that's great. Really fantastic. We're both trained together, but then their journey would be different to mine. I used to play rugby, so I would do a lot of strength training, but I was never really too fussed about having the V, which is something that you get when you've got like 3% body fat or something ridiculous. Whereas the guys that I was attracting were very conscious of having like the washboard stomachs. So they'd get up twice during the night to eat because they needed to have the protein intake. Otherwise they'd start losing body mass. That didn't work for me. So I looked back at everything and constantly kept refining what I was doing, refining the attributes of the person that I wanted to attract. And it all came to a head when I read a book called The Secret, which I believe is from Donna Byrne or Donna Bryan, American lady, always pronounce the name wrong. And she said, the book is about 300 pages and it consolidates everything down into one sentence, which is pretty much, you need to know what it is that you want before you can attract it. So she's talking about the law of attraction. And this was my first experience of the law of manifestation. And I went, oh, okay. So I need to know what kind of person I want. So I wrote down all the attributes. So I kept like a little journal of all of my failed relationships. And I use that word specifically because, failure and success. And I look back and I go, okay, well, if a guy has this trait, which is something I don't like, what would the opposite be? Used to beat me and have a low regard for women. So a man who would be the opposite of that would have a lot of respect for women and be comfortable with a strong woman. So then I wrote down this list. And it was a big list, I'm not going to lie. It was 4 sides of A4 paper. And, I say that and people go, oh my God, you were looking for something that's not possible. It's not real. You can't have that. You're defining a guy based on attributes, not physical appearance. Beg your pardon. You're defining a person based on, attributes, not physical appearance. How are you ever going to know this person when you see it? It's not like saying, oh, I'm going to attract Dwayne Johnson. You know, you don't know what he's going to look like or what they're going to look like. You just know because they're going to have these attributes. So your energies are going to attract, they're going to align. So I spent a long while refining my list and getting it down to a language that I liked. 30 days later, I met my husband.
Oh, I thought you were going to say that it took longer than that.
No, 30 days. Yeah, so I read the book from Donna in June, and it probably had something to do that I read it on holiday with the girls on a beach in Crete. I started writing my list in August, and it took a long time to get the language right. Well, the language that we say to others is a reflection of the language that we say to ourselves. And when we have time with a pen and a paper, we have time to get the language right. So when we've got that little bit of, you know, we've got 2 minutes to make sure we have the language crystal clear and perfect, then every time we say it, we are reinforcing that this is the right language, which then impacts how we actually say things. And so, yeah, so I read Donna's book in June. I started writing my list in August. I finalized my list on the 2nd of December. And then on January, I started reading my list. So January the 1st, 2015, I started reading my list. And I met my husband on the 30th of Jan.
Amazing.
Yeah.
The Secret, I know that there's a more recent The Secret. Is that the one you're referring to?
I don't know. I haven't followed the book. Let me just have a quick look.
Because I think it was sort of some collaboration about the law of attraction or something like that.
Yeah. So there is a series of the 4 books. I haven't read the other ones. For the sake of the price difference, I would just go for The Secret. Yeah. Well, I haven't read them. I can't recommend a book that I haven't read.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I haven't read it, so I think it will go on my list of things to read. But regarding the topic of how do you define manifestation and the law of attraction? Because for me, your list sounded very sort of cause and effect. So, you know, I'm looking for this thing, I've provided the cause, and the effect will be I'll start, you know, those people will become more visible to me because I'm looking for them. Whereas I think some people, they get, it almost goes into the woo-woo, if you see what I mean. What are your thoughts on that topic?
Well, I used to think it was woo-woo. I love that word. Thank you, Thomas. I was looking for a way to try and get that into a conversation today. I had my first wobble in corporate when the company that I'd left. So I used to work for a very big telecoms company in the UK. We got acquired by a bigger telecoms company in the UK, and I was on the short list to be made redundant, but I didn't want to hit the mark at the same time as everyone else. So I jumped ship really quickly. And I was sending out a message to the universe, was like, I just want a job. Just give me a job. I'll take any job. Just give me a job. And I took a job with a company that was around the corner. And within 6 months of being there, they sold out to a company that I really, really, really didn't want to work for. And it ended up tipping me over the edge. And I boarded at the edge of a nervous breakdown because the environment was so terrible and terrifying. To give you an example, the sales director who I was reporting to, I reminded him of his ex-wife who cheated on him because of like my facial features.
Oh.
So every time he looked at me, he saw his ex-wife. So he wanted me out of the business. So every single thing that I did was wrong. And I'm a person who likes to have a lot of action. I like to be confident in what I'm doing. And it was just a constant sledgehammer to my confidence, which for someone like me, that was really hard to take. So there was just one day I was like, you know what? Sorry, I can't take this crap anymore. I'm out. And I literally got up and left the office. I wrote a handover on a piece of paper, my password at the bottom, and just left my laptop, my phone, and walked. I was like, no, I'm done. That's it. And I've never been to that point any other time in my entire life. I went to see a therapist after that, and she pointed out to me that when you're sitting there and you're just thinking, oh my God, I just want X, you're actually putting that message out there, whether it's, and there's science to back this up. So have a look at Brian Cox. Love that guy. Every single thing that we do and see and touch, so my glass of water, we exhibit energy on each other. And whilst Brian talks a lot about, you know, the wobble of a star when planets are running around it, because there's gravity and forces acting between them to keep them in the same place. When we change our direction, when we change from having a glass of water to a cup of coffee or to a cup of tea, our energy changes. We have to move in a different way to pick up that cup. I'm only saying that because I've got a tea and a water next to me. But when we have a different drive and a different dream, when we're looking for a partner and not just somebody to, you know, get your leg over with a couple of times during the week, but a genuine partner that you go through life with, you enjoy the highs and the lows, you have a different energy when you look to meet them. And when you're attracting something, you know what you want. And when you know what you want, it's something within your grasp. You can see it. You just need to move closer towards it before you can grasp it. When you're manifesting something, it's I think I want this. And I can see it over there in the distance on top of a mountain. But because of the cloud cover, I can't see my journey towards it. So I'm going to head off in what I assume is the right direction. And the path might take me in different ways, but I'm still heading in the same direction. And we do this every single day. So look at kids who are, well, I was going to say sitting their GCSEs and A-levels. I haven't done that recently with COVID. But, you know, kids are getting asked today at 14, 15, 16 to pick the subjects based on a university entrance requirement for what they want to do for the rest of their life. Now, I can tell you, Thomas, that at 14, 15, 16, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was 30. I sure as hell didn't know what I wanted to do when I was 25. And things change. So before I met my husband, I was quite happy, you know, working in a soul-sucking corporate career. And met my husband, everything changed. We had a baby together, and all of a sudden, everything changed again. So with everything that's not fixed, surely you want to be doing the things that you feel most comfortable in doing, such as the subjects that you find most interesting, not necessarily the ones that you get the highest grades. Because when you have that spur and that energy, you'll be able to focus and attract the things into your life that you want the most.
Do you still use that exercise for other things? Your 4-page piece of paper? Oh,
yeah, a lot. If there's something that I'm working towards and I can't figure out how to get there, actually, I'm going to do this a different way. Be, do, have. 3 words mean nothing at all when you say them by themselves. You put them together and it still makes no sense, but it's a process. Most people focus on the haves. I want a new Michael Kors handbag, and they go out and buy it. But they buy it on tick. So then you have a credit card bill, which means that you then have to either sell some of your old stuff or work some overtime to get the money in to pay off the handbag. So you have first, and you then do the actions. And then what you become is impatient. You feel kind of like hollow because you're constantly filling yourself with your haves. Well, if you flip it around the other way, so I want to have this thing over here, and you know, I want to have a new car. I want to have a Tesla, but it's going to take me 2.5 years on back order. I said, okay, great. So what actions do I need to do to have the Tesla? Well, I need to buy the Tesla. Great, awesome. Need to understand what car, what like the features on it that I want, and you know, some of the interior, the selections, whatever. So what kind of person do I need to be in order to be able to do those actions to have the car that I want? So to be that person, I need to enroll people into my program on depression, anxiety. Maybe there's something there on relationships where people are looking to connect more, and that's another program. I need to speak at some summits to get my name more well known, so that more people can see the value of what I deliver and enroll in what I offer. Great. So it's all about generation, all about revenue there. So then you have the income to be able to go out and buy the car. The physical attributes that come along with that come when you get stuck. They come when you get stuck. So it must have 4 wheels. It mustn't necessarily be a Tesla, but it must be an electric car. It could be an electric car. It must be electric. It must be able to fit a buggy in there. I'm brewing the next addition to the family presently, so it must be able to be child friendly. It could have ISOFIX in the central seat across the back. It should have ISOFIX on the 2 passenger seats. And when you address it as must, should, and could, you get a priority order. And when you have something there that like it's a must and can't be broken, like it must be an electric car. If you wander into the Infinity dealership and they're always trying to push a diesel to you, well, you can't ride a diesel in the UK in 2035. So the car already has a shelf life. So no, I'm not going to look at that. Total deal breaker. So I get up and I walk out the store and I wander across to Ford or Hyundai or somewhere. I don't know why I said Hyundai. I probably never drive a Hyundai. Way too small for me. I like big cars. But by having that breakdown of the must, should, and could, and knowing what the deal breakers are, you're actually saying that, yes, I want this thing. This is what I think it looks like. And this minute little list is a deal breaker. This little list. So if anything comes up that's not in this box, it's never going to make you happy. Dwayne Johnson could have been one of those guys that I met when I was looking for my husband. But if he didn't have respect for women and believe that women were equal to him, I'm out. I know I said that, ladies. I said that.
Well, one of my follow-up questions was going to be, what about the people who, they don't really know what they want, but I mean, your process kind of addresses that. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah. So if people who don't know what they want, there's a really great vision exercise, which is straight out of a coaching textbook, which is, where do you want your life to be in 5 years' time? Because 5 years' time is 60 months. It's a perfect opportunity to actually, it's just far enough away that you can't grasp it and you can't physically see it, but it's also close enough to make it real. So where do you want to be living in 5 years' time? Well, in case there's another pandemic, I want to have my own place so that, I don't have to move, or I don't have to be at risk of being evicted by the landlord. Great. So then, and that's just one thing that's on your vision. Another thing on your vision could be, I want to live out in the country so that, if we are in lockdown again in the future, I can go for walks and, I can go out and I can see greenery. I'm not in a complex. I'm not in like a condoplex or like a block of flats where I can't go out because everything I touch is going to be touched by like 50 other people. I want to be safe. So I want to be out. And then you have like all this other criteria that goes with this one element of your vision. And that then becomes something that you work to. So then what does this place need to have? Oh, I'm going to have like a green sofa with pink fluffy cushions. Awesome. So when you see the fluffy cushions, you buy them. You do little things to make it come real. But that, again, is only one part of your vision. Another part could be get really involved with an activist group like Greenpeace, because you're hearing horror stories of the government not doing enough for plastics. And Greenpeace are all over that at the minute. I mentioned Greenpeace because the magazine's right next to us. I just read it this morning. So you're going to get involved in a bit of that, and then you just it's like, great, tick. What's next? I'm going to get rid of my gas guzzling petrol car that I get 22 miles to the gallon on, and I'm going to get a Nissan Leaf that gives me 300 miles on a full charge. Great. And then what do you get at the end of that? Well, I get more sustainable living. I get reduced fuel costs. I can power my car from the energy that comes into my house. And you just look at the different parts of what your life is going to be like in five years' time. And this is what you want your life to be like. So you could be sitting there in a council flat without 2 pennies rubbed together right now, and you could look in 5 years' time and go, you know what? I want to have 100 grand in the bank. And if you don't care where you're living or what you're doing, and that vision is a commercial value in your bank account, that you can look at it, it's tangible, you can see it, great. Then everything for the next 60 months is about how you get to that value. And that could be moving to London, moving to a different place, setting up your own business, learning to write code so you don't have to pay somebody to do a website. It could be any number of things. And then you make that future happen. The risk of it is that if you just sit there in the passenger seat of your life just happens to you. And then you get to be in your mid-30s and you look back and you go, Christ, that was crap. I would have much preferred to look back at my 20s and have gone traveling, or have met lots of people, or learnt a language, or whatever, because you weren't sitting in the driving seat in your life. And those are some of mine. I would have loved to join the military, but I was never allowed. I would have loved to have been a Marine, but back when I was 18, they wouldn't have allowed women in. Probably because we're too delicate and feminine, and spent ages on hair and makeup. I don't know. But that's all changed now. So if I was born today, would I have done it? Hell yes. And I would have had that experience. But by not jumping into the Marines, I was able to be on a £100,000 a year job, which I wouldn't have done. Because very sadly, people in the military don't get paid a lot of money. So I would have had the experience, but I wouldn't have had the capital. So it depends on what your vision is, So if you haven't got a vision, or you don't know what you're working towards, that's fine. Create a vision. If you don't know what your vision is, that's cool. Drop me a line and we'll sort you out.
I did an exercise and it was sort of the same ballpark of what you're referring to, but it was stating your ideal day. And looking back at it now, you could say it helped me somewhat, but looking at the actual, where I am now versus what my ideal day was, it's not anything like what my day is now. And perhaps what I would, if I did the exercise again, I probably wouldn't do it that way. But your way of doing it kind of allows for some flexibility because you've stated your criteria, and it's just a little bit more of a, should we say, a working document. So I just thought I'd highlight that because I don't know, it sounds, I really want to go and do it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Go do it. So the perfect day. Oh, I love that exercise. If you've got young kids, your perfect day is them not waking you up at 4 a.m. If you're a young couple, your perfect day might start with sex. If you're a business person, your perfect day might be logging online and seeing £100,000 contract in your inbox that you haven't pursued as a sale, it's just landed. It's different things for different people, but it's only one day. It's only a snapshot. It's a movie. It's a picture. And that's a snapshot in time, because where you are on your journey will be different. So my journey today and my perfect day that I think of right now will be different to what I think of tomorrow, which will be different to next week. But the vision that I have for the next, 4 years now, it is relatively fixed. There are things that change, but there again, I'm a woman, I'm allowed to change my mind every now and again. But it's generally fixed. I have an idea of the house I want to live in, the car I want to drive, how many kids I want.
I was about to say, do you want to share some of what that looks like now?
Oh, yeah, fantastic. So very sadly, I lost my mum last year. And dealing with grief is an interesting one. And for those of us who are struggling with the grief or the impact of a change, the best way to do it is think of the silver linings. Now, my mum and I had a very, very tragic relationship. We never really got on until my son was born. So my son was 19 months when she died. So, we didn't really have a lot of time, my mum and I, as being friends. And even then, when we were friends, it was quite iffy. And one of the things that I found most remarkable was when I was clearing her house, every single thing that I sent her, she kept. So, whenever you send flowers to somebody, you get a little card that says, "To Thomas, thank you for being on your podcast today. Lots of love, Vic." You get like a little card, right? Every bunch of flowers I ever sent her, she kept the card. Every picture I ever drew, she kept. When I won some art showcases when I was in my teens, she kept the pictures. She framed them and she put them away because that's what she was proud of. And it was incredibly emotional because here was this woman who I didn't really get on with. And towards the end of her life, I didn't really know her, but she was my biggest fan. And even now, when I think of that house, I kind of feel sad inside, because it wasn't my house. It wasn't a childhood that I had a good house in. And every single thing in that house just makes me feel awkward. So now when I think of what I want for my children, and I say children because I don't believe I need to birth them for them to be my own. It just so happens that I'm pregnant at the moment. I want my children to have space to run around and be free and be kind of crazy and wild and feral. So I'm looking at a property with some land. And I'd like that land to be near, so I'm pagan. So I'd like that land to be near some power centres or circles of power in the UK, and there's plenty of those. I'd like it to be somewhat near water, because I love the idea of having an Archimedes screw to power the house. I want to be completely self-sufficient and off the grid. I'll never go vegan because I love meat too much. Sorry, it's got to be said. But I am very obsessive about where my meat comes from. And to the extent that I chewed out my butcher, because 3 days before, so he had some meat out on a counter, and when I asked him where the meat came from, it came from a farm that had just had their standards revoked for mistreating animals. And I chewed him out so much on it that he removed all of the meat from that farm. I have no idea if he put it back out again, but that's kind of how passionate I am about it. Yeah, so I kind of have that living a meaningful life, but it's meaningful for me and meaningful for my children. I'd love to homeschool them. I believe that schooling is a fantastic establishment, but I think it's gone too far. I think it's gone too far as to churning out people that are perfect to fit a corporate life, whereas I remember there being kids in my class at school who really, really shouldn't have been there. They were incredibly disruptive. They had no attention. But you give them a piece of wood or a piece of metal and ask them to make a chair, or ask them to, blacksmith something, melt something down and forge something, and they could do it better than anybody that I know. And sadly, I had a quick look, Who doesn't love a bit of Facebook stalking? I had a little look at these guys last week before, just to see where they are and what they're doing. And they've gone back inside. So I think the way that education is run today is very much spitting out people that fit society, and it's not attuned to the desires and needs of the child, or that young adult, I should say. So I think homeschooling would give a much broader view and aspect of that. And for those of you who are listening who don't believe me and what I'm saying, my background is applied mathematics. My husband's a chemist. My sister-in-law is a PhD biologist. You know, I think we've got the sciences covered. We speak between us about 5 languages, got languages covered. We can all read, so that's English. The only thing that I haven't got sorted is history and geography. So, you know, we have the ability to do it if we so choose. What else does my vision include? My vision includes becoming more activist is the wrong word. Probably a word that's more closely aligned is like disruptor. So here's a good one for you, Thomas, and quite sensitive. Everybody here in the UK was looking forward to the new season of The Handmaid's Tale. Oh my God. Because it's traumatic. It's about this sort of like fantasy future where women who are fertile get raped so that they can breed. And women have no rights, no title to anything. So pretty much going back to like the 1800s here in the UK, in most of the world. And people watch The Handmaid's Tale with wine and popcorn and go, oh my God, isn't this fantastic TV? Yeah, 10 years ago, that was real life for women and young women across Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran. You know, that was real. It was real life. How many people know that? What's happening? You know, we as human beings, because we are all human beings, regardless of your color, regardless of your race, your religion, your views about whether the world is flat, your views about whether you or not you respect the opposite sex, we are all still human beings. And yes, you know, there are different cultures around the world. Don't get me started on South Sudan. But how are we supposed to change the world when we don't respect one another? When women who are believed to be fertile get raped because they want more children. If they have girls, then the girls get taken off them, baby girls get taken off them and killed because they're not good enough. They only want boys. It's like, what? Handmaid's Tale isn't quite as far as that, but you can just imagine the same sort of like graphic. There's no uniform to it, unless you count the burger, of course. So I want to get more involved in that. I think Amnesty International are doing some fantastic works across Africa. And one of the things that I am quite passionate about, I'm still trying to figure out how to get this project off the ground, is actually going out to African schools and showing, educating persons within the school about how to sew, how to make their own reusable sanitary pads so that young girls can stay in school. So here's a factoid. Across Africa and most of the developing nations, education is chargeable and it's not cheap, which is why most men, most young boys have an opportunity for education. The young girls get access to it, but the second they start their periods, well, sorry girls, you know, we can't afford menstrual care and we're sure as hell not going to have you bleeding all over the classroom, so you just don't go to class. Now that's fine, you know, if you're like me and you know, your cycle was sometimes 60 days, but what happens when your cycle's 15 days? You miss out on a lot of school, a lot of education. So you then drop out. If you drop out of school, you're working on the farm. If you're on the farm, you've then got to be fed. So you get married off at the age of 13, 14, 15. And it's incredibly common for 18-year-olds who were married off at a young age to have suffered 4 miscarriages by the time that they're 18. And when you're that young and your body's pregnant and miscarries again and again, it can cause infertility. So then if you're married to a man and you can't get pregnant, you are no value to him. So you get marked and you get evicted, you get thrown out. So the only way that you change this whole spiral from happening, so you can see that how that's like a spiral. The only way you stop that spiral from hitting the bottom is by changing it at the top. So if there was a way for girls, beg your pardon, that's gender specific. If there was a way for bleeders, to have access to reusable and sustainable sanitary ware that they can either make themselves or buy locally for cheap, then it would keep them in school or have the opportunity for them to stay in school. And then the rest of this spiral that lands at the bottom with them being raped, end up with HIV, AIDS, miscarry hundreds of times, miscarry lots of times, doesn't happen. You get the change. At the minute, COVID, can't travel, but it's what do you do? How many sewing machines do you need to make a difference? Is it just the girls? Is it just the bleeders then who get to make their own sanitary pads? Or does it then become a way for those people to learn a new skill? If they learn a new skill, if they learn how to sew, learn how to use a sewing machine, then can they make dresses? Can they go into fashion? What about the boys? Is this something that the non-bleeders could get involved with to make some extra income? Is this something that they could make for their mum, for their sisters? And it's heightening people's awareness. So you can tell I'm quite passionate about that. Just checked how long I've been speaking about that. But getting involved in that aspect, that side of things, hugely important.
Yeah, highly admirable goal. We do a social cause at our company where we sponsor children from underdeveloped countries, and it touches on what you said about tuition being not expensive, I guess, from our perspective, but it's there are ways to help. I suppose is the point now.
Yeah, and everything's relative. I mean, you mentioned there about it not being expensive. So internet across Africa is usually done as a data from one of these, from a mobile phone. And an hour's worth of data is like $4. It's $4, right? I think I probably even got that in my office. But when your average monthly earning of a family, which is a husband and wife combo, is about $5, you think, oh my God, seriously? So if there's like 60 kids in a class and each of the parents needs to put in 20 cents or 30 cents, whatever it is, in order to get the amount of internet so that they can download their documents, their videos that they need for education, all of a sudden it becomes ridiculously expensive. Yeah, I looked at working with an education charity and offering YouTube-based learning in English for non-English speakers across Africa. And the concept was brilliant, but actually being able to deliver it in a way that was cost effective across Africa, just we couldn't make it work because of the data usage, which is such a shame. And the one last thing I want to touch on as part of my vision is mental and emotional health. There's a lot of talk at the moment about mental and emotional health being included at schools. I think COVID has opened up a lot of people's eyes about mental resiliency, and the stiff British upper lip that we've had since the 1940s doesn't work anymore. And this ties in very heavily with ancestral healing. When an adult faces an event which is traumatic, they go, this is just an event. It's an experience. I'm going to get through it. So I'm going to be stoic. I'm going to, paint my lippy on, and I'm just going to do it. When a child goes through in a traumatic experience, especially if they're under the age of 13, it affects their mental development. Now, if you think about, where we are in history at the moment, we've had, 18 months of COVID nearly. We've got a lot of children, a lot of young people, a lot of, emotionally and mentally unstable people across the UK who have been struggling. And, the wait times, the wait lists to get access to these people, to be seen, to be helped, isn't getting any shorter. And I've got a couple of girlfriends that I'm working with at the moment about trying to pull something together that's like super cost effective for kids, literally covers costs, that goes in and teaches mental resilience. So one of my girlfriends is Jilly, and she's a supporter at Mikey's Line, which is in Scotland, and they do emotional health for children. And she teaches emotional health using magic, which is really cool. So we're hoping to incorporate some fun and flair into our practices on mental and emotional health as well. I've even got a selection of books that I'm reading online at the moment for children that are focused on mental and emotional health, because we don't talk about this stuff. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, I can remember as a kid, wanting to talk about when my grandma died with my mum, because I was feeling really sad, and I was told to go up to my room and cuddle a teddy bear and get on with it.
Not very supportive.
Not very supportive. And my little man, when my mum died, my mum was in Newcastle, you probably tell the Geordie twang. And when my mum died, I was down south because I chose to be with my family. My mum wasn't with it. It's not like I left her and she was still playing crossword puzzles. My mum wasn't with it. She was on palliative care for a while. And I had this photograph of my mum on the windowsill. And I explained to George that my mum had just died. So he went to the picture and picked it up and gave it a big old kiss and hugged the picture, because he knew that she'd gone. He'd met her twice. He'd met her twice. And he had that emotional intelligence to be able to know that she'd gone and that he wanted to hug her. I would never have done that as a child, let alone been two. And that's part of my teaching, part of my practice. You see your parents coming up and what you do, and then how do you choose to change it? Because I know as a kid I was fucked up. Sorry, I don't know if I can say that. I know that I was messed up as a child. And it's affected how I approach business. It's affected how I approach relationships and talk with people. And why would you want to refrain or channel back a child who realizes that his grandma's just died from hugging her? Why would you do it? My parents did it with me because it was normal at the time.
One of the things I was going to ask you about, which was, you mentioned about how your mum kept the stuff that you'd given her, but at the same time you didn't get on with her, or perhaps she wasn't the parent that you needed. How do you, because you mentioned that you've overcome some internal conflict in the messages that we exchanged before the episode, how do you think about those two contradictions in a way? How do you conclude from those two things?
Wow, fantastic question. We do the best that we can with the knowledge that we've got in the situation that we're in. So my mum was born in the 40s to her dad survived the D-Day landings, suffered what we now believe to be PTSD. He couldn't go outside. Every noise he heard, every bang he heard, he thought someone was trying to shoot him. Which, you read some of the stories that he left in his journal, and you attribute it now to be PTSD. But back in the 40s, he was a wuss, he was a sissy. Different language. Can you remember how we started out today, talking about the language that we say to ourselves and to others affecting how we behave? So he was a wuss and a sissy, so he became a barber, and then people would come to him to be cut and shaved, and there'd be one person in the house at a time, and there'd be no noise or anything. So my mum was brought up in a family where she wasn't allowed to make noise, where she wasn't allowed to have her own opinion, where her life was about expectation and judgment. So then, 40 years later, she has me. And during those 40 years, we've gone through the swinging 60s. We've gone through, the journey for women to have equal rights. It became common in the late 80s, early 90s for women to divorce men. Whereas before that never happened. He's playing away, screw you, I'm getting divorced. What? You can't do that. I'm the man. Used to be the usual retort. So my mum did the best that she did to prepare me for the life that she had. So she taught me how to survive in a man's world. So when a guy is clenching his fist and he's looking for the belt or the slipper or whatever it is that he uses to beat the crap out of you, you keep your face stoic so that he doesn't know how much it hurts. Because if he doesn't know how much it hurts, he's going to stop. Which is something that I got taught off my mum. That stoic face, I mean, people are going to listen to this and go, oh my God, that's horrific. But that stoic face, I refer to as my swan. So when the world was crashing down around me, I was still this really elegant, beautiful swan who could glide across the river, look majestic, and then underneath my feet were going 50 to the dozen so that I looked majestic. My head was always thinking, my head was always working. What am I saying that's triggering this person to hit me? And when I kind of look back, just to finish that thought process, this swan that I refer to allowed me to be very successful in corporate, allowed me to be very successful presenting to clients so that I would get deals in, which made my boss happy, which meant I earned more money, I got more commission, and I was, sitting on 100 plus by the time I was 30 as a salary. I had lots of money because of a learning that my mum taught me out of how to survive domestic abuse. And this is a reframing exercise that it took me a while to get through. So I look back at my childhood with my mom and I look back and go, I wouldn't, if I had that game line and I knew how the game was going to plan out, I wouldn't do that. I would do other things. Like, not that I want to mention the football, but subbing out people who have played like the full game plus extra time so that they can kick a penalty at the end. Wrong decision, in my humble, but it wasn't my call. Wasn't my call. I can look from the outside of a situation and go in and go, oh, you should add eggs to that. Or you could, you should just leave the same players on the pitch. Oh, you shouldn't do that. I'm not close enough to know whether or not that's the right decision. So you leave it to the people who are. And my mum raised me to live her life. So she gave me her life experiences. She taught me how to survive pain and torment. She taught me how to balance a book. She taught me how to live on £5.80 a week, which I've had to use once or twice. She taught me how to be strong and resilient. She taught me how to live without a man or without a partner and still be happy. So, my mum was a very, very strong, independent woman. She would always tell me that she loved me, but she'd always be angry when she said it. So I never believed it. I only believed it towards the end of her life when she needed me to help her with something, because I could tell the difference in her voice, that it was a mother's reassurance that she was looking for, that she'd done a good job. And you kind of look back. So I look back at some of the things now that I do with my son. I mean, he's 2. And there are some times when I get really, really frustrated and I make a few, I act out of character, which is my life experiences, rather than my personality, which is, considered behavior. And I go, so I said that and I sound like my mom. Okay, so I'm aware of that. So George is already aware of this do-over process. So the do-over process can happen immediately, or it can happen, after the event. You know how you always get told as a kid, never go to bed angry, always clear the air. This is something that I do with my son. It's called the do-over process. And I look back and I go, so what's happening right now, or what's the event I can relate to as a child? What did my mum do? Well, what did my parents do? How did it make me feel? How did I want to feel? And what would they need to do it? And I'll give you an example. About this time last year, my son wanted to go to the park, and my husband was repairing his car. He's quite handsy, which is good. Another one of the criteria that was on my list. And I mentioned the P word. I said, I'm going to take George to the park in about 5 minutes. Do you want to come with us? Because he'd have to get changed. I mentioned the P word. So G was immediately obsessed with why his shoes weren't going on and why we weren't walking to the park. And it was full meltdown. Instead of walking to the park barefoot, we went into the house, which just did not compute. This is like completely the wrong thing to do. He started stamping his feet. He knew the word park, but he couldn't understand. So I was like, right, okay. So I got really angry with him. And I was like, George, we're going to go in a minute. All right. And I started to say the things that my mum used to say to me, which wasn't very nice. And he's 2, bless him. Well, 18 months at the time. Then I kind of rattled through that 5-step process in my head and went, he doesn't understand what I'm saying. He's upset. He can't hear me. So let's calm down together. So I sat on the floor, cross-legged with him. And I asked him when he was ready, can I talk to him? And after a few minutes, he said yes. And I explained to him what the process was. So Mummy and George are going to go to the park. Mummy needs to do a couple of jobs before we go to the park. Would you like to help me with them? He said yes. So we got up, we took the washing out, we put another load in, we took the washing to the dryer, everyone's happy. That do-over process is something now that George does with his grandma, that George does with his dad. When something happens and they don't understand, or they kind of like, they miss each other. And I tie this back to like the excellence process that we spoke about earlier, that military excellence. I'm doing this event, it's not working right. Let's feed it back. What's the problem? What's the issue? And in 9 times out of 10, the issue is connection. There's something that's being missed. There's something in communication that means different things to different people. Like the word failure is a brilliant one. Have you failed an exam, or have you not achieved the right results? The words that we use define how we feel about something. If we have the power and the will and the drive to make someone feel really, really, really bad about themselves, then surely we've got the power and the drive to make them feel really, really good about themselves. And when you can't change your underlying character, what you can do is influence your considered approach. And it comes with practice. And you can apply this to any part of your life. You can apply this using the military techniques that we've talked about to find a man, to find a woman, to find that right car, that right job, or to raise your children in a different way so that they don't have the same hang-ups as you, so that they grow up to be independent, free-thinking children. You can apply it in any part of your life. Something that used to drive me absolutely insane in corporate was that people never used to do a deep dive. So we lost a bit of business. Great, on to the next. Why did we lose it? Was there some language in our proposal that didn't make sense? That was conflicting based on the client's internal language that they just weren't talking about? Were we talking about a combustion engine rather than just an engine? You know, was there something there that was wrong that we need to know for next time? Or was the price just not right? Or were we simply looking for a cheap car and, you know, offering a diesel vehicle instead of what they actually wanted, which was an electric? You know, did we miss the boat? No. We don't want to know. We don't want to know. You just want to move on to the next thing. We don't have time. The second we start saying to ourselves that we don't have time for things, we start acting rash. We start acting based off of our character, which is our lived experiences. When our lived experiences are only relevant and only active for that moment in time that they were there and they were actually being lived in the present day, then everything else is just a memory. Everything else is just history repeating. And if history repeats over and over and over and over and over and over again, and you don't get the result you want, it's just insanity. And if you don't believe me, have a look at Einstein. That's his definition of insanity. I refuse to be insane.
Lots of good stuff today, Vicky. If you don't mind me saying.
Nice way of saying shut up.
No, as a compliment. Is there anything that, given the context, is there anything that you feel like you would want to share with the audience that I haven't asked you about today?
The one thing that I usually get asked is about the confidence and the ability to make a change. When we are so used to doing the same thing over and over and over again, it becomes a comfort blanket. Now, when you're striving for something that you really want, you are going to aim for it and miss. And that's practice, that's experience. So just because you haven't succeeded in achieving something doesn't mean that you've failed. It just, that action that you did didn't work. So the best way to achieve the things that you really want in life is to get comfortable in being uncomfortable. Now, most of us set goals that are achievable. I'm going to paint the room this weekend. I'm going to go to the park with my child. I'm going to not shout at the child this weekend. I'm going to have sex with my partner this weekend. We set goals that are achievable and within our comfort zone. What happens when you set something that's unachievable? Well, if everybody knows that you're setting an unachievable goal, you then have to face them and say, I didn't do that. So set some unachievable goals and tell everybody, I'm working towards this. I'm going to earn £100,000 next week. And then when you earn your basic salary, how does that make you feel? Does it actually make any difference? Because when the fear of failure is gone, and when you're comfortable in being uncomfortable, you're then able to aim for and strive and achieve and have the confidence to try new things to receive the item, the thing, the experience that you really want. And sometimes I end up focusing more on that experience than actually delivering what people really want with my clients, because they're just not ready to be uncomfortable yet.
Well, I did say I was going to ask you about your goals, but you've laid out your vision. So
Yeah.
do you look at those two topics as separate, or are they one and the same?
The vision is more aspirational. This is what I'm aiming for. And then the goals are things that I'm working on actively to achieve that vision, because there'll be some parts of the vision that happen more quickly than others. And you only achieve your vision when all of the different streams have been achieved. So my goals for this year are to manage my stress so that I can brew another human being who is happy and content when they arrive in the world during January. So looking forward to that. My other goals are being able to connect with other strong individuals who are passionate for change. And I want to try, and now try is the wrong word. Try is not the right word. I want to empower 1,000 people by the time that I go off on mat leave to be confident, and I want to set them off on their journey, whether or not that journey is with me or with another consultant. I want to help them to feel empowered to make that change and to set them off, to get the ball rolling, because it takes one person in a family to make a change to everybody else.
Do you know approximately where you're at now? What number?
I'm at 490, so I have a little way to go.
You're on your way for sure. So it's very specific as well. So thank you for that answer.
I behind my monitor, so I have a computer here and a monitor here. Behind my monitor, I have a number. So every week, I add my new people to the existing people that I've impacted, and I rewrite the number so that I know what my current number is at all times.
That's awesome. Well done, and good luck for January. Congratulations as well.
Thank you.
Vicky, where is the best place for people to find you?
Oh, wow. Best place for me, well, best place I can send everyone to is probably my website, which is vickypoolecoaching.co.uk. In the top right-hand corner, there are links to all my main feeds. You can grab me on there.
Well, thank you for all the value today. It sounds like
You're
you're over prepared for your summit, so I'm sure that will be great. And thank you for the personal stuff as well, because I think there's a lot of value for other people to learn in that as well. So
Oh, thank you. Learning's in the story.